Family betrayal. My parents are giving my house to my brother. Because I'm single, you won't believe what happened when I confronted them. I should have known something was wrong the moment I walked through my parents' front door. The air felt charged, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. Mom was overly cheerful, her smile not quite reaching her eyes as she ushered me into the dining room. Dad barely looked up from his phone, merely grunting a greeting. And my brother Michael? He couldn't meet my gaze at all. But I ignored the warning signs. After a grueling week finalizing designs for the new community center project, I was just happy to have a home-cooked meal and some family time. At 34, I'd settled into a comfortable routine with these Sunday dinners, a way to stay connected even as our lives grew increasingly separate. "Alex, come see the pictures from the twins' birthday party," called Sarah, Michael's wife, waving me over to the living room couch, where she sat with their two 5-year-old daughters. I obliged, admiring photos of the elaborate unicorn-themed celebration while the girls climbed all over me, demanding attention. "Uncle Alex, did you bring us presents?" Lily asked, her expectant face inches from mine. I laughed. "Not today, monster, but I'm taking you both to the Science Museum next weekend, remember?" Their excitement was momentarily interrupted by Mom's announcement that dinner was ready. We filed into the dining room, the twins chattering about dinosaur exhibits, while I helped carry serving dishes from the kitchen. It wasn't until we were midway through the pot roast, Mom's specialty, that Dad cleared his throat in that particular way that always preceded an important announcement. "We have some family business to discuss," he said, setting down his fork with deliberate precision. Mom's knuckles whitened around her water glass. Michael suddenly became very interested in cutting his meat into increasingly smaller pieces. "Your mother and I have been thinking about the future," Dad continued, his voice carrying the authoritative tone he'd perfected over 30 years as a corporate tax attorney. "We're not getting any younger, and it's time to make some practical decisions about our assets." I nodded, taking a sip of wine. At 68, my parents were indeed reaching an age where estate planning made sense, though both were in excellent health and showed no signs of slowing down. "We've decided to transfer ownership of the Oakwood house to Michael and Sarah," Dad announced. The Oakwood house, my house. The cozy bungalow where I'd been living for the past 3 years since Aunt Maggie died. The house that had been in our family for generations, that my parents had inherited, and allowed me to live in while I built my savings for a down payment on my own place. I set down my glass carefully, aware that everyone was watching my reaction. "I'm sorry, what?" "It makes the most financial sense," Dad continued, as if explaining a particularly clever tax strategy to a client. "Michael and Sarah need the equity for the twins' college funds, and with property values in that neighborhood skyrocketing, it's a solid investment for their future." "But I live there," I said, stating the obvious because somehow, incredibly, this fact seemed to have been overlooked. "We know, honey," Mom interjected, her voice gentle but firm. "And we're giving you plenty of time to find a new place. 3 months should be sufficient." 3 months. 90 days to uproot my entire life. To abandon the home I'd poured my heart into renovating. To find affordable housing in a market where prices had risen nearly 40% in the last 2 years. "Let me get this straight," I said slowly, feeling as though I was moving through molasses. "You're evicting me from Aunt Maggie's house so Michael can have it as an investment property?" "Not evicting," Dad corrected quickly, "and technically, it's our house. Your aunt left it to us, not to you." "But you always said—" I stopped myself, the pieces suddenly clicking into place. All those conversations about how I was taking care of the property until they decided what to do with it long term. All those casual mentions of your future connected to that house. I had interpreted them as hints that the place would eventually be mine. Clearly, I had misunderstood. Or had I? You told me when I moved in that you were keeping the house in the family, I said, memories flooding back with painful clarity. You specifically said you wanted me to have a stable living situation, while I saved for my own place. And you've had that, Mom pointed out. 3 years of below-market rent in a lovely neighborhood. Most people your age would be grateful for such an opportunity. Most people my age. The implication was clear. Most people my age would have used that opportunity to get married, start a family, establish a more traditional household. Most people my age wouldn't still be single, still be prioritizing their career over family formation, still be living in a relative's property rather than creating their own home. I am grateful, I said carefully, but I'm also confused. Why now? And why Michael? He and Sarah already have a beautiful house in Riverside. Michael finally spoke up, though he still couldn't quite meet my eyes. It's an investment property, Alex. We'd rent it out. The income would help with the girls' education fund, and by the time they're ready for college, the property value will have appreciated significantly. So, you're going to be my landlord? I asked, incredulous. Well, no, Sarah interjected. We'd need to charge market rate to make the investment worthwhile. And frankly, with your situation, it might be awkward. My situation, being single, being childless, being, apparently, less worthy of family support than my brother with his picture-perfect nuclear family. I think what Sarah means, Mom said hurriedly, is that it might be time for you to find a place that better suits your lifestyle. Something more appropriate for a single professional. The room spun slightly as the full weight of what was happening settled on me. This wasn't just about a house. This was about my place in the family hierarchy. About the value assigned to my life choices compared to my brother's. I've been paying you rent for 3 years, I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. I've maintained the property, invested in improvements, treated it as my home, because you led me to believe it would eventually be mine. We never explicitly promised you the house, Dad countered, his lawyer instincts kicking in. And market conditions have changed. This decision makes the most financial sense for the family as a whole. The family as a whole, I repeated. Or just the parts of the family you value more? A heavy silence fell over the table. The twins, sensing the tension, had gone unusually quiet. Their little faces solemn as they watched the adult drama unfold. That's unfair, Alex, Mom said, her voice tight. We love you and Michael equally. This isn't about favoritism. Isn't it? I challenged, past caring about maintaining the peace. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like Michael gets rewarded with a valuable property simply because he checked the boxes you approve of. Marriage, children, the traditional path. While I get 90 days' notice to vacate the home I've come to love. You're being dramatic? Dad dismissed. This is a practical decision about family assets, not a referendum on your life choices. But we all knew that wasn't entirely true. My parents had never hidden their disappointment that I remained unmarried in my mid-30s, focused on my career as an architectural engineer, rather than finding a partner and starting a family. Every visit included subtle digs about my biological clock, thinly veiled setups with colleagues' daughters, pointed questions about my dating life. I think I should go, I said, placing my napkin beside my half-eaten dinner and standing up. Alex, don't be like this, Michael pleaded. We can talk about it. There's nothing to talk about, I interrupted. Dad's made it clear this is a done deal. The papers are probably already drawn up, aren't they? The guilty look that passed between my parents confirmed my suspicion. That's what I thought. Excuse me. I walked out without another word, ignoring my mother's calls to come back, to discuss this rationally, to not make a scene. The early evening air felt cold against my flushed face as I climbed into my car and drove away from the family home. It wasn't until I was halfway back to my house, no, not my house, never my house, that the tears started falling. Not just for the loss of a physical space, but for the shattering of an illusion. That my family valued me, Alex Harrington, exactly as I was. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of disbelief and anger. I ignored 7 calls from my mother, 3 from Michael, and a string of text messages pleading for me to be reasonable and think of the family. Dad, tellingly, didn't attempt to contact me at all. Instead of responding, I spent Sunday night pacing through the rooms of the bungalow, seeing it with new eyes, as something that had never truly been mine and never would be. The built-in bookshelves I'd installed in the study, the kitchen backsplash I'd painstakingly tiled one weekend last summer, the garden beds where Aunt Maggie's heirloom roses now bloomed alongside the vegetables I'd planted, all improvements made with the tacit understanding that I was investing in my future home. By Monday morning, shock had hardened into resolve. I called in sick to work, something I rarely did, and made an appointment with a real estate attorney for that afternoon. If nothing else, I needed to understand my legal rights in this situation. Patricia Menendez's office was on the 9th floor of a downtown high-rise, with views of the city skyline that would have impressed me under different circumstances. The attorney herself was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, with steel-gray hair cropped short and penetrating dark eyes that seemed to assess my financial situation even as she shook my hand. "So, Mr. Harrington," she said once we were seated in her glass-walled conference room, "tell me about your housing situation." I laid out the facts as concisely as I could. Aunt Maggie's death, my parents' inheritance of the property, our verbal agreement about my living there, the bombshell announcement at Sunday dinner. Ms. Menendez listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair with a slight frown. "Do you have any written documentation of your arrangement with your parents? A lease agreement, perhaps? Emails discussing the terms of your occupancy?" I shook my head. "Nothing formal, just verbal agreements and implications." "And you've been paying them rent?" "Yes, $900 a month. Well below market value for the neighborhood, but I've also handled all maintenance and made several improvements to the property." "Do you have receipts for these improvements? Any texts or emails discussing them with your parents?" I nodded, feeling a flicker of hope. "Yes, I have receipts for all the materials, and I'm sure there are texts where I mentioned the projects to my mom." Ms. Menendez made another note. "That could be helpful. In some cases, we can establish what's called detrimental reliance, essentially arguing that you made these investments based on the reasonable belief that you would have long-term occupancy." "Does that mean I can prevent them from transferring the house to my brother?" She gave me a sympathetic look. "I won't sugarcoat this, Mr. Harrington. Without a written agreement, your position is legally tenuous. Your parents, as the property owners, have the right to sell or transfer the house as they see fit. Your best-case scenario might be negotiating for more time or some compensation for the improvements you've made." My heart sank. "So there's nothing I can do to keep my home?" "I didn't say that," she replied, a calculating gleam in her eye. "Sometimes These family disputes are less about legal rights and more about leverage. Tell me, Mr. Harrington, what do your parents care about most? Their reputation, I answered without hesitation. Especially my father. He's very concerned with how the family is perceived in the community. A small smile played at the corners of Ms. Menendez's mouth. That gives us something to work with. Let me review your documentation and consider our options. In the meantime, don't sign anything your parents put in front of you, and don't make any commitments about moving out. I left the office feeling marginally better, though the knot in my stomach remained. Ms. Menendez had given me a glimmer of hope, but the reality was still stark. My family had betrayed me in a fundamental way, and no legal maneuvering could heal that wound. When I finally returned to the bungalow that evening, a familiar car was parked at the curb, Michael's silver Tesla. My brother sat on the front steps, looking miserable. "Before you slam the door in my face," he said as I approached, "please, just give me 5 minutes." I considered ignoring him, but ultimately sighed and gestured toward the house. "Fine, but I'm not in the mood for more family propaganda about why this decision is for the greater good." Michael followed me inside, hovering awkwardly in the living room as I dropped my keys and briefcase. "This wasn't my idea," he blurted out finally. "I want you to know that. Dad approached me about it 2 weeks ago, presented it as a done deal. I should have warned you, but he swore me to secrecy until they could tell you in person." "And you couldn't defy the great Richard Harrington," I said bitterly. Michael winced. "It's not that simple. You know how he gets when he's fixed on an idea. And truthfully, Alex, the investment opportunity is legitimate. The financial advisor at my firm ran the numbers, and with property values in this neighborhood. So you're here to justify taking my home as a sound financial decision? Thanks, but I already got that explanation yesterday. No, I'm here because you're my brother, and I hate that you're hurt. I hate that you think this is about you being single or me being married. It's not that, isn't it?" I challenged. "Would Dad be so eager to secure your financial future if I were the one with a spouse and kids? If you were the single one focused on your career?" Michael's silence was answer enough. "That's what I thought," I said quietly. "Look, I understand you didn't orchestrate this, but you're benefiting from it, and you didn't exactly stand up for me when they dropped this bomb." "I know," he admitted, shoulders slumping. "I should have said something right then. But you know how these family dinners go. Dad announces his decision as if it's already carved in stone, and we all just fall in line." The familiar dynamic was indeed part of our family pattern, one I had participated in myself countless times before. But this was different. This wasn't about holiday plans or where to hold a birthday celebration. This was my home. What do you want from me, Michael, my blessing? Permission to take over this house without feeling guilty about it. "I want to find a solution that works for everyone," he said earnestly. "Maybe we could delay the transfer for 6 months instead of 3, give you more time to find a place. Or perhaps Sarah and I could help with your moving expenses." "Stop," I interrupted, feeling suddenly exhausted. "I don't want your charity. I want what was implicitly promised to me, a chance to make this house my own, to build my life here the way I choose, not the way Dad thinks I should." "But legally, I know the legal situation," I snapped. "I spent my afternoon with a real estate attorney, getting a crash course in how few rights I actually have. But this isn't just about legalities, Michael. It's about family. It's about loyalty and fairness and seeing value in each other's life choices, even when they differ from our own." Michael was quiet for a long moment, his expression troubled. "I never thought about it that way," he finally admitted. about how differently Mom and Dad treat us based on our life choices. Because it benefits you, I pointed out. It's easy not to notice inequality when you're on the winning side of it. Another silence fell between us, heavier this time. Michael glanced around the living room, taking in the space I had carefully cultivated to reflect my personality. The wall of bookshelves, the architectural drawings framed above the fireplace, the mid-century modern furniture I'd sourced from estate sales. "You've made this place really beautiful," he said softly. "It feels like you." "It's the first place that has truly felt like mine," I acknowledged, throat tight with emotion. "Even if legally it isn't." Michael nodded, then straightened his shoulders with sudden determination. "I'm going to talk to Dad again. Make him understand what this place means to you. Maybe there's another way to achieve the financial goals without uprooting your life." I wanted to believe him, wanted to hope that my father might be persuaded by appeals to fairness and family harmony. But I knew Richard Harrington too well. Once he decided on a course of action, particularly one involving money, he rarely deviated from it. "Good luck with that," I said, not bothering to hide my skepticism. "But I appreciate the gesture." After Michael left, I stood in the center of my living room, still mine for the moment, and tried to imagine packing it all up, finding a new place, starting over. The thought filled me with a panic so acute it was physically painful. This wasn't just about losing a convenient living arrangement. This was about being forcibly ejected from the life I had built, the future I had planned, all because I hadn't followed the prescribed path my parents had laid out for me. It wasn't fair, and for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't going to quietly accept unfairness in the name of family peace. The next morning, adrenaline replaced despair. I woke up early, made a pot of coffee strong enough to strip paint, and started plotting my counterattack. By the time my phone chimed with a text from Ms. Menendez confirming our follow-up appointment for Thursday, I had filled 3 pages in my notebook with ideas, angles, and potential leverage points. At work, I struggled to focus on the community center blueprints, my mind continuously drifting back to strategies for saving my home. My colleague Jordan noticed my distraction during our team meeting. "Earth to Alex," he said, waving a hand in front of my face. "You okay? You look like you're planning a heist or something." "Something like that," I muttered, then forced a smile. "Just some family drama. Nothing I can't handle." But as the day wore on, I found myself increasingly fixated on one particular realization. This fight wasn't just about me and my house. It was about a broader pattern I'd observed among my single friends. A pervasive societal assumption that unmarried, childless adults somehow mattered less, deserved less than their counterparts who had followed more traditional life paths.